What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Assisted Living Investing. I want to talk to you about raising money from investors. And one of the important questions I get is, do I raise money on equity or do I raise money on debt? And I've done it both ways for assisted living. So I wanted to give you some context and break it down because there's not a right or wrong. There's not a best way to do it. It really goes back to your deal. So I want to give you some context, some kind of parameters on, is it best for me to look at my deal raising money on equity or on debt? And before we even jump into that, man, I think a lot of times people will ask me, well, why do I need to raise money from investors? Why do I need investors at all, right? Can't the bank just lend me the money? Yeah, the bank can lend you the money, but most of the time, the bank is not gonna lend you 100% of the funds. And when you're getting into the assisted living game, there's two parts to this deal, right? There's actually two businesses you'll create. You'll have your real estate business that owns and operates the assisted living. And then there's actually the operations side. You'll split that up. So the operations side is its own entity. And that right there is something that you can raise money for. You can borrow money from banks. You can raise money from investors for that. And there's actually two sides. So the operations side is unsecured by any real property there. So that kind of gets a little sticky on going to banks and saying, hey, you know what? I need money for working capital and furniture and, pre-opening salaries. All of those things are awesome. You can raise money for that and you can borrow money from banks from that, but usually it's part of a bigger package. So let's break this down a little bit. With me, when I started out in 2019, we did our first assisted living and we raised money on debt. And that deal was on Mesa Street. And so that project was about 1.1 million. We bought a 1974 ranch house. It was about 3,500 square feet. And we did a very large addition and gut on this thing, literally down to the studs. Man, I think we were about $650 or so in renovation costs. And again, this is like 2019. We were planning this before COVID, all the different things, before all the crazy price inflation. Now it would probably cost double that. But anyways, it was about a 1.1 million in there on that deal. And we raised that all on debt. So what I mean by that is we borrowed 100% of that money. We borrowed 1.1 million from actually three different organizations and people. So I want to unpack that, the pros and cons, why I was able to do that on this deal and why I did not do it on my next deal after that. And really, I would say the difference is the size of the deal. 1.1 million was something that I could raise. I could raise that all on debt because I actually did not go to a traditional bank to do that. And that's one of the sticking points when you're going to raise investor funds. So I raised the 1.1 million all private. And so it was actually, private money. I bought a house, right? I bought that house with actually hard money first. I bought it with hard money to take it down. And I had a backup plan. I was going to flip it if everything didn't work out with permits and everything. So I bought it right away and I go through permits and all of the kind of things, get my ducks in a row. And then I refinanced out my hard money loan within, 6 or 9 months or something like that to another individual. It was actually family friends of Laura, and they lent us about $750,000, something to that effect. So it was more than the hard money loan. So we paid off the hard money loan. They are now in a first position, and I had a decent amount of the money that I needed for construction. But I knew it was not all the money I needed. So simultaneously, I'm still doing investor meetings, meeting with people. So then I raised $200,000 in a second position from some friends and family, people who had invested with my flipping company prior to this. So they were in second position with 200 grand there, right? So I had it was 950, something to that effect going in there. And I actually thought that was gonna be all the capital I needed. But then here's the problem with, doing home conversions. We opened up the walls and it was like, oh, nothing is what I thought it was gonna be. The structural engineer guy was like, nope, we're not gonna be able to, connect the new construction building because we added about 3,500 square feet, 33, something like that. So that product on Mesa has 15 private rooms, 12 baths. Most of the baths are half baths with 2 big shower rooms. And so gorgeous, gorgeous product of this home conversion. But it was one of those things where you go into it and you're like, oh, I can do this and this and this. And then you open up the walls and you're like, ah, crap, I have to totally re-engineer this thing. And so we had to take down a lot of the walls. We had to add all these beams and do a whole bunch of structural engineering kind of reconfiguration to make this project work. And so it bumped the cost up and up and up and up the deeper I got into it. And so it ended up being I needed more money than I thought I was going to. So it was probably halfway through the project, right? That we knew I needed about another 200 grand. So I raised, again, private money from a friend who had invested with us before, another 200,000 in the debt position. So they're actually in a third position behind the first two loans. And let's see, so that put us about 1.1 million in total debt. But what we had is we knew that the project, the real estate itself, was worth about 1.6 to 2 million. All right, so there was still a lot of security in that position. Now, the first person in first position, they had a ton of security, but even the third person, they had less, obviously, security. But what we did to compensate them is we gave them the debt, right? They had the loan secured against the property, but then also I did a profit sharing agreement just on that third position person because there was more risk there. They should have more reward. They came in not at the very beginning, but actually near, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through construction. So we're walking through the mansion and everything. They can see it. We're like, oh, cool, we're close. We'll be done in like 3 or 4 months, right? And then we're going to operate and all those kind of things. So we set up a profit sharing agreement with that investor. And that, again, found that win-win right there. And I think that's the flexibility that I love with raising money is you can structure this multiple different ways, and especially with assisted living because you have two businesses. You have the real estate play, the security there, and then you have the operations play, and you can pull part of the cash flow out and use that as additional wins for your investor. So that's what we did. They got their interest tied to the real property on the debt, and then they also got part of the net profit from the operations company. And that was not forever. That was until they got their money back. So that put a time limit on it, right? That was a win-win for all of us here. Now, I really like this, number one, because Laura and myself have 100% of the equity on the real property there, the actual building, and the operations company. So we went, it was not that much longer after, maybe a year after we finished construction, because it was only like 2 years of owning the property. So from the day that I built or bought that house, then it was only 24 months. I was able to go to a local commercial bank. We had an appraisal done. It came around $2 million. I had 1.1 million in debt. We got a new loan, paid off the first, second, and third position. So all 1.1 million was gone. Everyone got their money back. And so now Laura and myself, again, this was like 2021 and interest rates were like in the low 4s. So we got this crazy awesome interest rate, right? On a 25-year term. It was a fantastic loan. So we have this long-term, great stabilized loan there. We were paying like 12% to investors, which is what it is for a year or two. So that they got great returns. They got their money back. My investor who was in third position was getting profit sharing for a little bit of the time there as well. And it bumped his return up to almost 20 or a little bit about that. So it was a win-win all around, but it allows myself and Laura to have 100% equity in the assisted living and the operations company business, which is a huge, huge win because, I mean, we opened that a few years ago. The amount of equity we have in there, there's 2, 3, 4, maybe not 4, but probably $3 million, probably $3 million worth of equity in that property. And it's just like, we don't have to share that with anybody. That's all ours. And so that's fantastic. But I went and did my next deal and I did not do that, right? And here's kind of the boundaries on this is there's limitations to the strategy. I think you can do it for a home conversion. You can do it for a deal that's probably 1.5 million. You can raise 100% of that because I did not go to the traditional bank until the project was done and stabilized. And then I refinanced out with the traditional bank. So as you are looking for, deals that are maybe under $1 million, I would say, yeah, you should definitely consider doing this structure, raising money on debt, and you don't go the, traditional bank kind of route. See if you can raise all the funds or be creative with some of the stuff with seller finance and those kind of things on the front side, and then be able to come back and refinance with a commercial loan after that. So let's talk about the other side of this, right? The equity side. Why would somebody, myself included, raise money on equity after I just told you I could do X, Y, and Z and have 100% of the whole deal? And it's because the deal got bigger, right? The bigger the deal that you do, especially when you're talking new construction, I think it pretty much says you cannot do it this other way going on the debt side. It pretty much leads you to only the equity option. And so let me unpack that. What our other deal was, we built out our neighborhood of mansions. And that was about 8.4 million total development cost. The bank loaned us about 7 million of that. And then I raised investor funds of 1.4 million. So first and foremost, the bank's paying or funding most of these funds, right? But they want you to have a certain down payment. And with SBA, it's common that they will do 10, 15, or 20% down, and they will fund the rest. And that's not just the real estate side, that's also the business side. So meaning that with my 8.4 million, there was like almost 2 million, 1.5 million worth of other expenses. So all of the SBA fees, the title insurance, all those kind of things, the working capital money there, the money for furniture. There was like 500 grand in a bucket for, construction reserves. There was money for interest reserves and lease-up reserves and all these different things, right? All of that is fundable through the SBA. So I did my $5 million SBA loan in first position. I did a second position pari passu loan, which is kind of like a commercial loan in the second position that matches the SBA. And that allowed me to do all of this. And I put about 15% down or so on this deal. So when I say I had to put 15% down, I can't go borrow 15% because that's not me putting it down. That's debt and then more debt, which doesn't work. When the bank wants, hey, I'm going to lend you 85%. I need you to have 15% in cash. Okay, it needs to be in cash. It can't be another loan. And so the thing to consider there is it does not have to be your cash because technically you're not buying this. You're not getting the loan. You know who's getting the loan? Your entity, your LLC. And your LLC is owned by you, your spouse, right? Usually through your holding company. And also your investor. Your investor is part of the LLC. So it's really coming from the ownership team, right? You bring on investors. Now they're part of the ownership. They have equity in the deal. And therefore, the money, it doesn't matter if it's coming from you or from them. It's coming from the owners, right? It's just from the team. And so my investor put up the 15%, which is about 1.4 million. And that allowed us to do the deal. So the bigger drawbacks, right, is number one, right off the bat, when you have to give away equity, you don't have 100% of the ownership, right? And you can split this up into the two different sides because we said there's two different businesses, right? You'll actually create two entities. You'll have the real estate entity and the operations company entity. So you are giving away a portion of the real estate entity for sure. Usually, not exclusively, usually you are giving away another portion of the operations company as well to balance out the real estate play, which only really kicks in on the backside when you go to sell or cash out refinance, and the cash flow, which is, from the operations company. So then the other really important consideration here is they do not have to be equal equity percentages that you are trading for money. So in my example, if you are raising 1.4 million, you are going to trade equity for that. It is for sure going to be on the real estate company. And whether you get above that 19, 20% threshold is a totally different story. If anyone who has 20% equity or more will have to personally guarantee. So there's kind of a line in the sand there. You want to keep investors under the 20% line. So that may mean instead of one investor, that means that now you potentially split it. And you have two investors at 10% and 10% instead of one at 20 or something to that effect. But you can have a lower percentage that you're offering on the operations company side. So let's consider you raised money, you gave away a total of 20%, 10 and 10 on the real estate side. And that does not mean you have to give away a total of 20% on the operations company side. It doesn't have to be 10 and 10 over there too. It could be 5 and 5. It could be 7 and 4. It could be whatever you want to create the win-win, right? That's the special part about being able to do this. You can talk to your potential investors. What is your objective? Do you want the safety? Do you want the big end play when we go to sell this and we split, the multiple millions when we go to finish this deal and sell this real estate? Everyone wants that, right? But what percentage of that? Do you want the lion's share of that? Do you want a bigger proportion of that? Or do you want a bigger proportion of the cash flow? Or is it kind of some kind of balance in between? And I always like to tell our partners that when you're raising money, you as the operator, you want to take the lion's share of the operations company. That is your blood, sweat, and tears. That is your hard work. This is you building success in your business, and you should be rewarded if you are successful. we're all gonna get the appreciation on the backside. You go to sell in 5 or 7 or 10 years, man, it's a gorgeous building. We're building at a discount, specifically when we're building these new construction mansions. So you're building at a couple million on the front side, and then it's gonna go up and up and up and up, right? And you're gonna sell the real estate and the business later. The real estate portion of that, based on appraisal, they'll split the appraisal and say, here's the value of the real property, here's the value of the business, right? You can say, okay, well, you're gonna get this based on the appraisal of the real property. Then you're gonna get this different amount based on the appraisal of the business value, right? So I think that you should have the disproportionate win on the operations company. And you can use this flexibility to find really the win-win between you and investors. Now, here's another layer that I wanted to add in that makes these kind of deals really awesome. So we built 2 of our 4 mansions on our neighborhood, right? We have 8 acres, 2 of 4 buildings are done. We have safely about $6 million of equity so far in this, and it will continue to go up. But what that means is I don't have to raise more money to build out phase 2. I'm planning to keep my investor involved in this. We're going to use the equity that we have in order to essentially refinance, pull some of the cash out of that refinance to fund the new down payment for phase 2. And for us, we'll probably need about another 4.5 million to build the next 2 mansions, and I'll probably need about 10% down, right? So I'll need about 450 grand. And I don't even have to come up with that in cash. I don't have to use my own money. I don't have to use my investor money. I can just literally use the equity I have to roll into the next one. And so our project's 2 phases, right? 2 mansions up front, 2 mansions on the backside, and that'll finish this out. But you could potentially build 1 and then pull equity out and refinance and build number 2. And then a couple years later, pull equity out, build number 3, build number 4. You could have enough equity to pay off the investor after phase 1 and build number 2. Right? That's the dream right here, is you are rolling the equity, especially when you're building new construction. You can build so much equity into this. It's not like we're buying existing facilities and they're worth 3 million based on appraisal, so we're paying 3 million, right? We're building them for 3 million and they're worth 6, 7, 8 million. I have appraisals from across the country that can prove that, right? That we are building so much equity by building new construction, and now you can pay off the investor and then roll that and build number 2 and then build number 3. This is real wealth right here. This is the big boy game, right? We're not talking about little home conversions. You can build some serious net worth by doing this kind of model. And so everyone's got a different deal for them, right? I would encourage you to go back and look at your kind of deal. Is it right for me to raise money on equity? Is it right for me to raise money on debt? And if you want further training on this, hit our website, assistedlivingmansion.com. Free resources. There are 3 courses there. One of them is funding. It's like 26 lessons, really, really in depth. I go into this there, and you can get a lot of value from that. So I hope this helps you. I hope that you can do a big life-changing deal, and I'll see you on the next one.